Why don't we begin with prayer? The Lord be with you.
With you.
Let us pray. Loving and gracious God, our times are in your hands. Look favorably upon us in this strange time of pandemic and sickness. Help us to care for those who are ill. Help us to be a blessing for those who care for those who are sick. And help us by the power of your Spirit to do what you would have us to do when it comes to our worship and our ministry in this place. On this day when we celebrate the ministry of St. Bartholomew, help us to walk in his footsteps, for we ask it in your name. Amen. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm so glad you could join us. Welcome to St. Bart's Part 3. We had a gathering this morning as a part of the forum for the associate clergy to talk a little bit about the programming they're doing and what's going on with them. We had a lively worship service, and now we have an opportunity to talk with the wardens, John Gilliland and Liza Page Nelson. And we have 3 physicians who have been very generous in offering their time and expertise to us as we try to make important decisions. Dr. Catherine Belford-Budd, Dr. Jim Marion, and Dr. Jamie Ferrara. Those are our guests, and we'll be calling on them a little later. Liza, I'd like to invite you to start it off and make sure we have all the proper instructions.
Well, I'll do the best I can. Thanks, Dean, and welcome everybody. So we're doing this as a webinar, which is a little different from a Zoom meeting. You can see and hear us, the panelists. We can't see or hear you, and you can't see and hear one another. If you want to ask a question, please type it into the Q&A feature on your Zoom screen. There will be a Q&A window, and if you don't know where the Q&A is, if you have your commands at the bottom or the top of your Zoom screen, it'll probably be next to chat, and between chat and participants or share screen. And you can just type that in, and Dean will help us answer them in the order that they were received, and if there are a lot of questions that are similar, he'll probably paraphrase so that we can be sure to address what's on your minds. And if you have trouble with that and don't see the Q&A prompt, look for the magic 3 dots and see if it comes up that way. So we panelists will not be checking our texts and emails, so if you want to ask a question, please don't text or email us because we're probably not going to respond right now. That's it.
Great. John, would you like to say anything to begin?
Takes a little while to unmute. Well, I guess I would like to thank everyone for joining today. This is a very important meeting to have. You've heard a lot from Dean already about the state of St. Bart's, and we'll be talking about various plans that we have today. I think what I would note here perhaps is that Dean referenced the fact that all of our parishioners have been extremely generous, and we're doing well in our stewardship numbers. However, as you may recall, we talked about a significant budget challenge earlier this summer, and we can happily say that we are currently performing in line with that budget, but we are absolutely not out of the woods by any stretch, and we still have a significant budget deficit for the year. However, I would like to point out or rather, I would like to thank our staff who has worked so hard to help us with this whole financial process. Raquel and also Keith Rook as chair of the Finance Committee, and of course Liza Page. So we are We are continuing to monitor very closely what is happening with respect to our finances, and we will continue to do that. The vestry is meeting frequently, and this, of course, is a significant topic of discussion. So, in addition, I guess I would just like to take this time to also thank Kara for the wonderful job that she's doing. So, Dean, I think that's all that I have to say. Liza Page, how about you?
No, let's hear from the rector.
All right. Well, I've been, as you can well imagine, very well served in this unprecedented time by having deeply dedicated wardens, a deeply committed vestry, and some of the most talented and faithful clergy that I've ever had the privilege of working with. There were a number of things that would have been disastrous that the Lord has spared us from, including the delivery, as I've spoken before, which now feels like a bona fide miracle, but to have the live streaming equipment delivered and installed literally the night before we first needed it seems something out of the ordinary. And if we didn't have that resource, we would have either had to spend a tremendous amount of money to rent that equipment, or I would have been standing there holding my iPhone and no one would have been all that impressed. So I'm in the midst of tremendous challenges. I keep finding these extraordinary blessings. As Deborah and the associates mentioned before, you know, no one would choose this, but some of the ministries that we've leaned into, we would never have done if we didn't have to. And finding our online audience and cultivating a different demographic is a very exciting possibility for us going forward. I can't imagine now that we have experienced this online community that we will go back and not have that as an option. We will have to make accommodations to do live worship with in-person a congregation. It'll be a little different, but I think that in the future, you're just going to see more of that. The adult education offerings, the worship, the daily offerings. As I mentioned, well, Deborah mentioned, and I've just been kind of blown away by the thought that one of Deborah's meditations have been seen by more than 1,000 people. And so as you see things, as you see content that speaks to you, and you share it with your social media connections, that just spreads the word and helps us reach more and more people. We're certainly doing a wonderful job in reaching a large community, and we are competing with some of the largest churches in the country in terms of the kinds of audiences that we have had, both in terms of the live stream, and then maybe more importantly, all the people who see the service after the live stream. So that is maybe a good transition to why we haven't been maybe as aggressive as a few people might have wanted us to be in terms of returning to in-person worship. We've been listening to the experts, both at the city and state level. We have been listening to the guidance we've received from the Diocese of New York and the Bishop's Office. We have the great benefit of having physicians within our congregation who have a great deal to contribute to this, and some very wise people on our vestry and wardens who've had experience in their own organizations. So people who've worked in universities and people who've worked in corporations are bringing back some of the wisdom from those experiences. You know, we're in Manhattan, you know, at the heart of everything. We have observed that some of our Episcopal neighbors have been more aggressive in terms of reopening. St. James has in-person services, and St. Thomas, Heavenly Rest, has moved in that direction. St. James is allowing the congregation to sing with masks, which is something that we don't feel is borne out by the evidence, and I'll have the doctors speak more specifically to that. So I've always said that I kind of wanted to put St. Bart's in the middle of the pack. That I didn't want to be first out of the gate, and I didn't necessarily want to be the last congregation that went to in-person worship. Trinity Wall Street is on a slower schedule, as is St. John the Divine, as is several other large parishes in different cities that we like to connect ourselves to. I always like to know what Trinity Copley Square in Boston is doing, and they, in a similar way, kind of look and see what we're doing. So, so all of that is to say that because we've had such success in terms of the live stream and attendance there, we haven't felt pressed to move beyond our comfort zone. However, at this point, here we are in the middle of September, or late September. We have the preschool is in its first week of operation. We had kind of a soft rollout following very rigorous protocols, and the acquisition of some new equipment that helps with the air handling in the classrooms. Teachers have all been well trained, as has our building staff, working very hard to keep that a safe thing. Inside Park opened a little earlier, kind of in the late summer. They have the advantage of being a large multinational corporation with great protocols around safety. And so they are following those and have thus far been operating without a negative incident. Crossroads, our food, our program that gives food to people who are hungry. We realized we couldn't have people come into a dining room. That endangered our guests and our volunteers. We aren't set up to continue to run the shelter for overnight care because we didn't have enough room for social distancing. But we can provide grab and go food so that there's very little contact between the volunteers and the guests. And we have been offering that. And at some point in the not too distant future, we hope that we'll be able to offer the pantry services as well. So, you know, the survey that we did was entitled a Regathering Survey, because we realized we're not reopening. We've been open and we've been providing worship service from the very beginning of this. And we have different aspects of the parish, even now, serving different populations. We took the opportunity during this time when we were, the building was closed, to work on the pool. It was flaking paint, which the healthcare inspectors don't like to see paint falling into the water, and we knew that was a good time to deal with that. And we've done a lot of intensive cleaning around the church. You wouldn't recognize the high shine on the floors. It's really testimony to all the good work that's been done. And contractors have been largely been able to work installing the replacement windows in the community house. So now we're at the last step is to reopen for worship. And you may say, well, why would that be why would we do all of these other things first? We're doing this last because in some ways this represents the greatest unknowns, and we wanted to be very careful to get it just right. So let me take just a moment and I'll put up a draft of a regathering plan that we have. And then I'm going to invite the doctors to offer their thoughts. All right. All right. Can everybody see that? Smaller, maybe smaller print than mine. Okay. Well, so the first thing that we did and did successfully was, of course, the live streaming service. The next step we wanted to do was to add cantors and lay lectors, which we have now done. Well, we've done that in September. The next stage is to continue the live stream service, to have some extensive rehearsals with the clergy, the building staff, and our lay volunteers to ensure a culture of safety is prioritized. I'm indebted to Jamie Ferrara. I think that's a term they may use at the hospital where he works. And I think that's the kind of culture that we are trying to create here. We want to be very careful. We want everyone to feel safe, including our staff, some of whom are in a higher risk category. In stage 2, the church would be open on Sunday afternoons to allow for public prayer. We believe that that should be by reservation. So you'll be able to do an online reservation. We may be able to have a few spaces where people just come up to the building, but they would have to fill out a form for contact tracing, and we would prefer that people get in the habit of reserving spaces, and that'll happen when we move to talk about the worship. So the church would be open on Sunday afternoon for public prayer. There would be a 5 p.m. Sunday Eucharist, which would begin in the church, choosing the church over the chapel because of the greater volume of space there and the ability to socially distance. Corey tells me that he thinks that when we're properly socially distant, that we have a capacity for about 100 people. We want to begin small, and so we'll begin with 25 people to see how we do, and then we'll go from there. But initially, those services would be 25 people, and then we'll probably take a step up when we feel like we have a handle on it to 50, and then so on. The Sunday evening Eucharist would be a more contemporary liturgical style, feature a contemplative approach. It'll be disappointing for some to realize that there can't be congregational singing. We'll use the freestanding altar and standing communion stations so people don't come to the rail and kneel. We don't want any of those kind of contacts. We'll use some candles to give it the proper feel. And mask will be required for clergy in the congregation. This is a counsel from our doctors, but also a requirement from our bishop, who said when you're doing in-person Eucharist, the clergy have to be masked. We would only be offering communion in one kind, distributing the bread, because that too has been a decision the bishop made about distribution. So we're going to put our toe in the water in that way and find out how that feels. We're not really sure that a lot of people will want to come and be a part of this service. We'll find out what the appetite for this is at this point. But we think there'll be more interest if people are assured that we're taking every practical safety precaution. Stage 3 happens a little later, and I initially had kind of a date on there and said, well, maybe we'll do that in January, but we don't really know when we'll be able to do that. It'll be based on recommendations from our medical advisors and local, state, and diocesan officials. We'll continue the live stream service. The building would open on Sunday at 8:30 a.m. and we would put a 9 o'clock Eucharist in, which would be unlike our pre-COVID pattern. This service would be would be an exact replica of the 11 a.m. liturgy with the hymns and choral pieces omitted. Congregation would receive communion from standing stations. Mass would be required. The doors would close right after the 9 o'clock liturgy ends so that we can have a safe environment to live stream the 11 and have time to do some cleaning. And then we would open again on Sunday afternoons. Christmas is, again, it seems like it's right around the corner to those who are liturgical planners, but given the nature of the virus, we can't be absolutely sure what it will look like. We're planning now to offer one primary service at 7 p.m., which would be live streamed with hymns and choral anthems provided by socially distanced musicians and no congregation present. We will offer several identical services for in-person worship by reservation without hymns, no choral anthems, perhaps only a soloist or an organist or perhaps an instrumentalist on Christmas Eve, and then another couple services on Christmas Day. We thought we would offer them at 3, at 5, at 9, and at 11, and then on Christmas Day at 10 and at 12. We may find that that not all of those services are subscribed, and then we'll adapt the schedule to meet the need. We're still figuring out, frankly, what the pageant, the Advent lessons and carols, and the candlelight carol services look like, but they're most likely would be live streamed if we can do that. Stage 4 happens when we're able to add on Wednesday services and weekday services. Stage 5 is basically a return to the pre-COVID schedule and practices. So that's a quick run through. You're going to be seeing more of this in the e-news and in different ways. But I want to highlight draft regathering worship plan because it is a draft and we are changing it actually every day. Lisa Page Nelson said I should begin dating it each time we change it, and you'll see that the date on this one is today. So that's when we made the last change on it. So I'd like to call in our doctors to offer their perspective and on not just this plan, but upon the kinds of protocols that we are planning to do, and maybe they can say a word about the advice that they've already offered.
Well, this is Jamie Ferrara. I have to say that, first of all, I'm just starting my video, which is why I'm hesitating here. There we are. You know, the plans to reopen have been going on already for months. And the clergy and the staff have been, were very thoughtful about this. And, you know, when we were asked for our advice a little bit ago, I think that what they, because other churches have already opened, they were maybe expecting you know, congratulations or a pat on the back. You know, instead they got 95 pandemic theses to nail on the front door of the church. And what was the response? You know, was it resistance or reluctance? no, it was exactly the opposite. Dean said, we want this culture of safety. We know that people want to come back. We know that though that some people are afraid, you guys in the medical profession have figured out how to do this safely, how to gather where the virus is concentrated and still not have extra infections or extra problems. And one of the things that we have learned is that the biggest variable here is often human behavior. You know, you can clean a surface and it stays clean. The surface doesn't infect itself. But people do funny things when they get together, particularly when they're excited about coming back to a place. So we're just so excited to be able to do this in partnership with the clergy, and they've just and the leadership. It's been really remarkable. And I, for one, being in an age group that's you know, a little more at risk, I'm already feeling reassured that I'm going to be able to come back sooner than later. And the idea here of this culture that everybody participates in, that you know, from the moment that people walk into the front of the church to the moment that they leave, I think that that's not only going to make us all feel better, but it models, you know, sort of Christian care for each other and how we are our best selves in the midst of difficult circumstances. So I've just been so privileged to be part of this, and I'm very grateful.
Thank you, Jamie. Jim, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, Dean, I guess I want to start by thanking you, all of the clergy, wardens in the vestry, for being a real source of support, and I'll use the old-fashioned term succor, during what I think we'll remember as an historically lousy chapter in New York history. For those of us who were on the front lines, for those of us who weren't, for the parish members who succumbed to this or were affected by it, all of you, you know, from the clients of Crossroads to all of us on this call, I think we can really give you all a heartfelt thanks. It was needed and used, and having the live stream was really just lovely for us. It was a way to measure time that seemed to be going on for too long for many of us. So I want to thank all of you. I also want to applaud this idea that we have to have a culture of safety. People have to feel safe when they come back home to St. Bart's, because it will feel like a homecoming. And I think Jamie hit the nail on the head by saying, well, listen, when you've not been home for a while and you're seeing people you haven't seen, it's very easy to get carried away. And the hugs and the kisses and the hand holding and the pats on the back and the sitting down and getting the latest update that we enjoyed getting every Sunday, is going to have to wait and until, you know, the situation improves. But I think if we put our toe in the water, understand that the virus is only looking for another way in, and that it is still circulating outside the doors of the parish. And as long as we assume that it cannot be trusted to do anything but do what a virus does, which is use us as a means to getting to another human being, then I think I say the plans that you've come up with, or that we've come up with you, will ensure that we will not be that parish that ends up in the New York Post with reports of new COVID cases. And that's happening now already in the city, people who are letting their guard down a bit. So hats off to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Catherine? Well,
Yes.
Unmuted and hear from you.
Thank you, Dean. I want to echo the gratitude already expressed to our rector and wardens. This plan has been developing over many months and very carefully, and I think we can all be comfortable with that. I also want to assure people that your responses to the survey, the regathering survey, are very much appreciated and played a large role in the decisions for the initial steps and the subsequent steps for reopening. Just one example, the 5 p.m. Sunday service was the one most often requested among the options that were given, and that's going to be the first service to happen in person. So we heard you and have listened, and your comments and answers are being incorporated into the plan. The other thing I just want to mention is that we all realize that we will need to be flexible as time goes on. We have this overall structure in place, and I think it was a good decision to not put dates on subsequent steps in the plan, and it will be a many-step plan. We have to see how things evolve in New York City and New York State and the surrounding areas, and we may need to adjust further, or we may find that we need to stay in the same spot for longer than we expected. But be assured that your safety and your health are the paramount concerns as we regather, and we hope that those who are comfortable will consider returning, but for those who are not, and there are many people who are not expressing comfort with returning yet, the online offerings will continue and we can still be a community.
We have our first question. It looks like Liza Page is ready to answer it, and I can add to it. Take it away.
Thank you. So Barbara asks if the 5 p.m. service on Sunday will have music, organist, cantor, and given how large the nave is, why would we start with only 25? And in the forum, Dean, you explained quite well that we're starting with 25 to make sure that the plans we have, the protocols for how to move people, how to position them, who the enforcer is if people are not wearing their masks or are being not sufficiently socially distanced. We want to practice that on a small scale before then expanding and taking advantage of the space in our beautiful nave. And I'll leave the music to you, Dean.
Well, we do plan to have music at the 5 o'clock service, either a cantor or organist or probably both. And as soon as we think we can safely, I mean, we're going to have some people kind of monitoring our work, and we'll probably get some report cards that say, well, you have to, you know, kind of polish up this practice, or let's review this. Once we feel like we're doing a work, we want to then open it up to more people. But it was suggested that we start with a smaller number, and this will give us a chance for our volunteers to learn the steps of this very new dance. But we don't. We're really in a wonderful place in terms of the space. We think, you know, we can have, as time goes by, we'll be able to have services keeping people spatially distanced. We'll be able to have a larger group than some other parishes might because of our size. But I think we'll, you know, we're talking 25 people to start, then we'll go to 50 or 30. We'll see how it goes. Thanks, Barbara. You're going to be a big part of helping us do some of these steps. The lay volunteers that we have, ushers, greeters, the building staff, these are just critical parts of what will make this work.
And if I could say something just in addition.
Please.
You know, in the building in which I work at Mount Sinai, the atrium at the front of the building has become the waiting room for the clinics, because that's the place where people have the most space. So I've been going into work and watching what happens. And it's very interesting because the first week was a little chaotic. As even the people who were not used to doing what they were doing and helping people come into the building, doing it in a new space, suddenly you get these little clusters and traffic jams, and then very quickly you could see people becoming uncomfortable because they didn't know where to go, they didn't know how to get other people there. And so this idea of starting slowly, see how it goes, particularly with our ushers who are so eager to come back, but who also want to do this well, that's part of this, I think, this culture of safety that we are trying to model for everybody. And so if it goes perfectly and it's great, we can open up sooner. But if it, as Dean says, I think we're all going to be watching very carefully in the beginning to see how we can improve even further and make sure that everybody feels good as soon as they come into the building and are greeted by our wonderful folks that do that so well.
We also want to make sure that we're not putting our greeters in the uncomfortable position of being enforcers. We will use some of our building security staff and pray that we have trained them in the gentle art of persuasion. A church that is known for its radical welcome is particularly vulnerable to sending the wrong message if we're not careful. But we do want to maintain a sense of safety and security for everyone. Now, this is not the only thing we need to talk about, but I wanted to make sure, because this is on the minds of so many people, and as folks have watched different parts of the church kind of wake up, I wanted to make sure that you had all the information you wanted around this, but we're happy to talk about other things going on as well. It's been a remarkable time in that in the middle of all this, everything else that we normally do, we've been doing in some different form. A lot of pastoral care has happened through telephone and some Skype meetings. We've had a number of course, the educational programs have in some ways expanded, and our offerings for daily worship have, I think, gathered more people than we would have on a Sunday if we had in-person worship. Okay, so I am seeing Wendy, what are the plans for the youth group and younger kids? We've got some work to do. This is one of the areas right now where we are experiencing a kind of a two-pronged loss. Chris Lewis Thurman did wonderful work in that area, as did Dent Davidson. Chris was a part of our staff reduction and trying to bring our spending in line. And Dent, we had not planned on losing him, but his spouse found work in California, and he felt that they needed to be together, and so the COVID pandemic has had a lot of effects on people in terms of careers and work. So the initial plan actually is to gather with some of the stakeholders around youth ministries and parents of younger children to find out what it is that would be helpful in this moment. When we made these reductions, I said we can't do everything that we had been doing with fewer resources to do them. A lot of times organizations will say we're going to do more with less. What that usually means is that you go pretty quickly through your personnel and wear them out. So this is an example of a place where we're taking a step back to look and see what we think we should be doing. And I think some of the people who are involved in this ministry are really the experts in it. Liza.
I wanted to thank our congregation for being so responsive. There was a request to let us know your status, where you're living, how you'd like to be reached, what you're interested in. More than 400 people completed the survey, and many of the people who completed it did so on behalf of their families, so it represents an even larger number of people. So thank you very much for doing that, and I believe that people that expressed pastoral concerns and that what else do you want to tell us are being systematically contacted by our clergy team. And more than 100 people had a response in the gifts that they would be willing to share. And so some of you will be contacted sooner rather than others because there's specific things that would really benefit from the skills that you have said you have to offer. And I think eventually, I hope everybody can be at least thanked for being willing to share that. Also, so many of you responded to the regathering survey and took the time in several of the questions to share really thoughtful comments about your concerns, your hopes, expressions of thanks and gratitude. An overwhelming theme of, even among the people most eager to come back, please, let's be safe. Let's keep the clergy safe. Let's keep the staff safe. Let's keep one another safe. But we're so grateful that people took the time to respond. And as you may have inferred from Catherine's statement, you were listened to in the desires that you expressed. Big factor in coming up with this draft regathering plan. So thank you all for that. And especially on the regathering survey, Catherine Belford Budd, Patrick Hornbeck, Peter Thompson, Tara Flannery, instrumental in our getting that done. And I just wanted to throw that in there, Dean, before I forgot it.
No, thank you for that. I was thinking too that you'll see some enhancements over the next month, in the coming months, as we realize how dependent we are on our cameras and the angles. We're acquiring some additional equipment so that we're able to produce at a very high level. Today, you might have seen during the hymns some scanning through some visual images. That was a suggestion that I think was helpful. And if you have suggestions from your perspective, sitting at home in your pew, it's helpful because sometimes it's harder for us to imagine what it's like when we're inside the space. I also have an opportunity to say it's not very often that you have 3 medical professionals who are willing to be so gracious with their time. And I've checked with my insurance, and I know that it does not cover all of these consultations, but I am so grateful for all of your time and your generosity. So thank you. So I'm looking for questions here, and I'm not seeing a lot. And some people have said nice things. Is there anything else that we should be covering? Anything else you want to know more about? I said earlier that, sometimes these sort of forums are scary for people, and please feel free to send me an email if there's something you wanted to ask but didn't want to ask it in front of the gang, and I'll be back in touch with you, or one of the associates will. We're in the process. In the census, we asked, would you like to be contacted by a clergy person? And it turns out when you ask that question, you'd better be prepared to respond. A lot of people said that they would, actually. And so in part of it, I think in these times, it's just nice to have a little touch base. And so a lot of people have said, I didn't have anything in particular. It wasn't a major thing. I just, yeah, it's just good to hear from you, and keep me in your prayers, and keep doing what you're doing. So that was a nice pastoral byproduct of the census. And a lot of the information that came back in the regathering survey was really warmly pastoral to the staff and clergy. So we appreciated that. So David and Rebecca are asking, can you speak about the auction of Waldorf items to benefit the St. Bart's Conservancy? I can say a little bit about it, that the Conservancy is an independent nonprofit that is created to raise money for the building of for our church building. It allows corporations and other entities to make contributions to a national historic building without giving to a church and a religious entity. And so the team at the Conservancy continues to try to make relationships and cultivate gifts. And the Waldorf had all of these items that they realized that they weren't going to put back into the refurbished Waldorf. And so they decided that if they could offer them to St. Bart's Conservancy, that would be a good thing for them and a good thing for us. So Liza, I'm sorry, it looks like maybe you were supposed to answer that. Did I say it? Is that all the truth?
No need to gild the lily. Well done.
Yeah, good. Thanks. A comment that work's been done in front, behind, by all in front and behind the scenes to bring us together by YouTube and Facebook, and to plan our safe return.
Oh dear. I believe our rector has frozen. I'm going to ask the panelists, is Dean frozen on your screens as well?
Yes.
Oh dear. Okay. Well, we'll hope that he comes back. I'm just checking the Q&A. David asks, where can we see the auction items? I am not sure, but that is something that we can probably post a link on our website. I know that there is a way to see them. It may be through the Conservancy's page itself or their Facebook page. And there was a question, is this session being recorded? I believe that it is, so that it is available on demand later, but I will ask Liz or Kara to confirm that either way in the chat, and then we'll tell you all what the answer to that is. Checking the Q&A here. I thought it might be interesting to share with people, since there have been some questions about the response to our virtual offerings, and there was some discussion of this in the forum, so sorry if this is repetitive. The Sunday 11 a.m. live stream between March 22nd and September 13th had almost 42,000 views on Facebook and YouTube. And we didn't think to be tracking the difference between total views live and on demand. So when that started, which was April 12th through September 13th, there were 36,670 views, of which 19% were live and 81% on demand. So it's interesting how many people are either watching it again to see a part, or 11 o'clock on Sunday was not their time, but they still wanted to have the live stream experience. Our average Sunday viewership is 1,615. And the average live is 295, and the recorded is 1,300. Easter was still our biggest Sunday, with 4,700 views of that wonderful live stream service. Most of that on demand, but that's we have not enjoyed that kind of reach ever. Over 800 of those views for Easter were live. Our average viewership of forums, which is mostly on demand rather than live, is 675 views per week. So there is, I think in the forum, Peter Thompson mentioned that there were some 150 unique visitors to the various adult formation classes and book groups. But imagine the message of the forums in this time going out to 675 viewers per week. That's really astonishing if one believes in the value of the messages that are getting out there. And I have a bunch of other, statistics that one can share. More than 30,000 people have viewed Deborah Lee's This Is Another Day. There have been 700 participants, not all unique, in centering prayer since March 22nd. There have been over 1,050 participants in night prayer, AKA Compline, just between May 3rd and September 13th. Paolo Bordignon has better numbers for the musical views, but that part tracked by the church from March 29th, almost 76,000 views of choir and organ on YouTube and Facebook, with an average of 3,436. So someone earlier today, George, asked, is there any way we can, this is not how he framed it, is there any way we can monetize all of this digital contact? And other than the shift of almost all of our supporters to online giving, that's something we very much need to examine. And we'll have to find that right balance between radical welcome and not wanting any barrier to anyone who is feeling called to worship or to study or to be in community. We don't want there to be barriers, but it would be nice to find some reasonable way to have that contribute to the cost of offering all of that programming. Suggestions are welcome, and George had some specific recommendations that I think will be worth our talking about. I'll stop talking now.
Liza, I did get a message from Dean. We've lost Wi-Fi in the Welcome Center, so he will not be able to join us. So I don't see any other questions, and I guess one thing I would like to say before we leave is that, and this is actually, I'm channeling our rector a bit, but we are very grateful for the generosity of all of the congregation in giving money to St. Bart's, and we still need that. We need the continued support to make sure that we are able to make it through through this year, offering the same things that we're offering right now. So that is a request for everyone. Thanks. Liza Page, anything else you would like to add here before we terminate the call?
We've had a few more questions come in, and I'm just going to take a quick look at them, John, and see if there's something that we need to respond to immediately. There was one question. The music has been wonderful. Will Paolo be able to continue and have enough resources as we head into Advent and Christmas? Would you like to answer that, John?
Sure, absolutely. He'll have the resources as we head into Advent and Christmas. This is one of the critical parts of our ministry, being online, and it will continue to get all the support that it needs.
Great. Were you signaling, John, that it's kind of our time to wrap this up when you were asking that?
No. Well, it was my mistake. I didn't see all the other questions.
Ah, okay. Thank you, Greg. A link to the Waldorf auction can be found at Departures Magazine. So it's www.departures.com /lifestyle/shopping/Waldorf Astoria auction. Wow, that's a lot. I think if you just do Waldorf Astoria auction and Departures, you might find it. And Barry also mentioned the link. So thank you to that. There was another question about, is all of the reach translating into higher individual donations? We're trying to do that analysis now. We're not sure. It may be that there are more donations from people who were not previously giving, but they're smaller because they're people that have not been as woven into the parish. In fact, we're pretty sure there's some of that phenomenon. And there are some people who have really dug deep at this time, and I'm not sure how we would parse that out to know how much of that is the reach versus just people finding a way to be engaged when they've really needed it. It's a great question. It's one we're trying to understand. So thank you, Wendy, for asking that.
Hi, guys. We had a little failure here of the Wi-Fi system at the church. So Carol was out for a bit, and I was out, but I'm back. Are there any other questions? It sounded like we were just getting ready to wrap up, and the last thing I was going to say is that we so appreciate if you can be even more generous with the church. We appreciate your generosity. Any way that you can be helpful is a wonderful gift to us. I've been so impressed by the way the congregation has responded to this moment, and I'm excited to see, the downside is that we have this crisis, and of course the silver lining is all of these things that are being revealed about the congregation and about our ministry and about our purposes right in the middle of it. So. It's a great privilege to be working with all of you around things that really matter in a time that is of deep consequence. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Loving and gracious God, continue to walk with us and guard us and guide us. Save us from false choices. Open our hearts so that we may have your heart. Increase our capacity for compassion and love, for tenderness in a hard time. Bless this congregation that we may know you and make you known, to the honor and glory of your name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all very much. And again, if you have anything else that we didn't respond to, send me an email and I'd be happy to talk with you.